India's economy, past, present, and future. As future leaders, our students, you have responsibilities many things, towards many things, and the leader responsibilities that you have, number one is towards yourself. So सबसे पहले आप सभी की सबसे बड़ी जिम्मेदारी है अपने प्रति. And how do you discharge that responsibility? You discharge that responsibility by taking care of two things. Number one, as students, keep enriching your knowledge continuously. And number two, take care of your health. So that is number one that you need to take. That is responsibility number one that you have to take care. Then remember, you have a responsibility towards your family. Today, your parents are sparing no efforts to ensure that your life becomes as comfortable as possible. Dear students, you may not be aware so many sacrifices your parents are making to ensure that your life, your journey of life becomes as comfortable, as convenient as it can be. So you also have a responsibility number two, that is towards your family. Then you have a responsibility towards society. Obviously, whatever we are today, whatever you are today, is all because of the entire society. तो ये तीसरी आपकी जिम्मेदारी है कि आप ऐसा कुछ करें कि जिस सोसाइटी ने आपको इतना कुछ दिया है, आप भी उस सोसाइटी को रिटर्न में कुछ दें, so that this society becomes a better place to live today than what it was yesterday. Then you also have a responsibility towards the humanity at large. Dear students, please remember, this life that the Almighty has given to every one of us is so precious that it is just impossible to give a price tag to the life that we have. And therefore, we also need to ensure that we discharge our responsibility towards the entire humanity. With our deeds, thoughts, and actions, we bring cheers on the faces of everyone. That is the responsibility number four. And for that, you have to ensure that you make yourself a very strong and positive personality so that you are able to influence life of many people. And finally, friends, we also have a responsibility towards the nation, responsibility towards the nation as a whole. And this is where I thought that you, as the future leaders of this country, you, as the future of this country, should have an idea as to how the economy of this country has progressed since independence, in what state it is today, and where it is going to be tomorrow. So that once this perspective is clear to you, once you know as to how the economy has progressed since independence and what is to be done to ensure that this economy of this country becomes very strong and powerful, and you should also be able to understand as to why economy of a country has to be very strong and powerful. So once you have this understanding, I am sure that will empower you to even contribute towards the growth of the economy, and that is the fifth responsibility that you would be able to discharge. Let me start this discussion on India's economy, past, present, and future, to give you a perspective as to how did we start. हम सभी को मालूम है 15 अगस्त 1947 we got independence. India got independence on 15th August 1947. How was the condition of our economy, of our country at that point in time? Number one, it was a partitioned India. इंडिया को दो भागों में बांटा गया था, हिंदुस्तान और पाकिस्तान. There was agony of partition, and I'm sure all of you must have read and heard about it, that when the country was divided, when the division happened, in that process, friends, very unfortunate, but 20 lakh people died in the process of the partition. And so at the time of the independence, there was an agony of partition. Economy was in shambles, industry and trade was in shambles, and insignificant infrastructure. तो जब हमें आज़ादी मिली, क्या हालत थी हमारे देश की? हमारे देश की हालत थी कि भाई पार्टीशन का दर्द था, इंडस्ट्री शेम्बल में थी, ट्रेड वॉज इन डिफिकल्टी, एंड देयर वाज हार्डली एनीथिंग इन द नेम ऑफ infrastructure. But there was one thing that was good. And what that good thing was, that good thing was that the people in this country had very optimistic outlook. तो जब हमें आज़ादी मिली 15 अगस्त 1947 को, एक चीज़ जो बहुत बढ़िया थी और वो थी कि people had very positive and optimistic outlook about the future. That was the first time in this country people thought that now that we have become independent, good days will follow in this country. And that was the situation at the time of independence on 15th August 1947. Two gentlemen who were at the helms of affairs at that point in time for, for leading the future of this country, one was Bapu and second was Pandit Nehru. Bapu thought that India should attain self-reliance through the process of development of micro sector, mini sector, small sector. And that was the perspective that Bapu had. Whereas Panditji thought that India should go for massive industrialization. India should set up huge and big plants. So you could see that there was a departure, there was difference between the understanding of Bapu and Panditji. But both of them agreed on one thing, and that one thing was that India should become a socialistic country. And that is how, at the time of independence, our leaders at that point in time decided that India should become a socialist country, socialistic pattern of society. Now, remember, there is nothing wrong being social. There is nothing wrong being a socialist country. There is nothing being a capitalist country. There is nothing wrong in being a communist country. All of them are perfectly fine. All of them are perfectly fine. But for whatever reason, our leaders thought that we should become a socialist country. As a result of that, what we did, incidentally or unfortunately or whatever as you may say, we restricted private entrepreneurship in this country. Now please remember, socialistic pattern of society would mean what? It would mean that the government will tell to the people, look, we will not only run the country, but we will also run the business. And why we would run the business? Because their perspective was, we would run the business because if we let the private sector to run the business, then few people will become too rich and many people will become poor. And that is how they thought that we should become a socialist country. Because we became a socialist country, what we did, we restricted private entrepreneurship. तो गवर्नमेंट ने क्या कहा? गवर्नमेंट ने इंडस्ट्रीज को कहा, बिजनेस को कहा कि देखिए बड़े बड़े जो बिजनेस है वो हम चलाएंगे, छोटे मोटे बिजनेसेस वो हम आपके लिए रिजर्व करते हैं, आप उनको चलाइए. बड़े बिजनेसेस में आप पढ़ने के चक्कर में मत पड़िए, बिकॉज इफ यू गेट इनटू बिग बिजनेसेस यू विल बिकम वेरी रिच. एंड दिस इज हाउ द पर्सपेक्टिव वाज as far as our leaders was concerned at that point in time. As a result of this, friends, we became a controlled economy. We became a controlled economy. And what we had in this country, we had in this country license Raj. We had in this country Inspector Raj. So that means what? That means in case if anybody wanted to set up a business in this country, he need to go to Delhi and take a license. Only after taking license he could start producing something. And not only that, if you start manufacturing something in this country, there was an Inspector Raj. So there were so many inspectors that were imposed on the businesses. Now that unfortunately was something, that's where something went wrong as far as the growth of the economy is concerned, as far as the development of the economy is concerned. तो अब देखिए ये जो लाइसेंस राज और जो इंस्पेक्टर राज जो चालू हुआ, उसकी वजह से क्या हुआ? उसकी वजह से अनफॉर्चुनेटली, नोइंगली और अननोइंगली और इंसिडेंटली, वी स्टार्टेड गिविंग एनकरेजमेंट टू पीपल फॉर रिमेनिंग स्मॉल and inefficient and unproductive. And let me give you an example as to why do I say this. Do you know, there was a rule in this country, and before the advent of GST, there was a rule in this country. And what was the rule? The rule was that the government will tell to the industry, look, gentlemen, if turnover of your company is less than 1 crore, then we will exempt you from excise duty. But if the turnover of your company increases beyond 1 crore, then you will have to pay excise duty. Now, friends, this is like this, that tomorrow your nephew or your niece comes home from the school and you tell it to him or her, look, boy, if your marks are 33%, then we will give you a cycle. But if your marks are more than 33%, then we will give you a beating. Now, please understand, obviously, what the boy would do. The boy would do, he would make least efforts and try to make his marks only 33%. But will a businessman do? Will a businessman work to keep a low turnover? Of course not. A businessman will always like to grow. But what he would do, the moment his would start crossing the limit of 1 crore, what he would do? In the same premise, he would start two companies under two different names. Half turnover under one company, half turnover under the other company, so as to keep the turnover of the two companies below the threshold of 1 crore. And you think that would work? Of course not. And why would that not work? Because the excise inspector will come to the company and he will tell the owner, look, gentlemen, company A is yours, company B is also yours. Both companies are yours, and that is why I have to take the combined turnover of the two companies together, which is more than 1 crore, and that is why I have to charge you excise duty. Now, please remember what the businessman would do. Would he pay the excise duty? Of course not. He would simply ask the inspector, sir, what do you want? And the inspector would say, send an envelope of rupees 10,000 every month to my home, and then you be happy and I be happy, and let the government do whatever they want to do. And this, unfortunately, friends, this is how we started encouraging corruption in this country. Unknowingly or knowingly, we started giving encouragement to be small, to be corrupt. आपको मालूम है, for decades altogether in this country, we had only 3 IIMs. For decades altogether in this country, we only had 5 IITs. And whereas it was known to everyone that every year 2 lakh students would appear for the IIT or for the IIM exams, and there were hardly 2,000 seats. And that is because controlled economy and license Raj. It is very interesting that if a bank would want to send a branch, open a new branch in a new location, now what the bank will need to do? Bank will need to go to RBI, apply for the license, for permission for opening a new branch. Now tell me, as a family, would you like your income to be less or would you like your income to be more? Obviously, everybody would like the income of the house to increase as much as possible. But unfortunately, for whatever reasons, we tried to scuttle the growth of this country, and that is what happened. So we gave encouragement to corruption, and there was a primacy of politics over economics. So unfortunately or incidentally, somehow it appears that at that point in time, people who were in the power, they somehow wanted to come to power by using different narratives and different policies. And that is how in this country, what did we have? We had perennially loss-making units. So a lot of PSUs were making losses, airlines were making losses, and when I say airline, that means Air India, and Air India was making losses after it was taken over by the government from Tata's. I'm sure you must have read about it recently. Government of India has sold Indian Airline to Air India to Tata's. By the way, should also know, and I'm sure you would also know, that originally Air India was started by J.R.D. Tata. Government took it over from J.R.D. Tata, made huge losses, kept on making losses until recently, and then finally it has been sold. So since there was no accountability, all the PSUs were making losses. And I was reading a book called Beyond the Blue Mountains. This book is written by a gentleman called R.M. Lala, and this book is about Tatas. And Mr. Lala writes in this book one episode, and I would like to share that episode with you. Once G.R.D. Tata was in conversation with Panditji, and G.R.D. Tata told Panditji, why don't you let us set up this project in private sector? We will make this project extremely profitable. And it is said that Panditji retorted and he said, Jay, never ever mention this word profit before me. So please understand, this was the attitude of our leadership towards the word profit. And that is why there was no accountability, there was no responsibility. All the PSUs were making losses and losses and losses and losses, and all those losses were getting funded by the common citizens of this country. What we did in this country post independence, as a result of the policies that we adopted, the hoarders, black marketeers, brokers, and intermediaries, they amassed wealth. तो जो दलाल थे, इंटरमीडियरीज थे, ब्रोकर्स थे, उन लोगों ने बहुत सारी दौलत इकट्ठी कर ली. और हमारे देश में दुर्भाग्य से जो लोग करप्ट थे, हम उनको माला पहनाते थे, और जो लोग ईमानदार थे, हम लोग उनके ऊपर हंसते थे. तो बिकॉज ऑफ ऑल दिस, व्हाट हैपेंड? Because of all this, India became a sailor's market. And why did India become a sailor's market? Please remember, it's very simple. जब हम आज़ाद हुए, हमारी पॉपुलेशन थी 33 crores. And please remember, 33 crores is a big market for any economy to grow. But हमने क्या किया? हमने कंट्रोल्ड इकोनॉमी करी, हमने लाइसेंस राज किया. तो एज ए रिजल्ट ऑफ दैट डिमांड हमारे यहाँ बहुत थी, लेकिन हमने क्या किया? सप्लाई को हमने कंट्रोल कर दिया. सप्लाई को हमने कंट्रोल कर दिया. चूंकि हमने सप्लाई को कंट्रोल किया और डिमांड ह्यूज थी, इंडिया बिकेम अ सेलर्स मार्केट. एंड व्हाई इंडिया बिकेम अ सेलर्स मार्केट? बिकॉज डिमांड इतनी है तो आप जो भी बनाएंगे वो सेल होगा. एंड दिस इज हाउ इट हैपेंड. सो now what are the dangers of sellers market? तो इंडिया बिकम ए सेलर्स मार्केट. सेलर्स मार्केट के नुकसान क्या है? सेलर्स मार्केट में क्या होता है? लेट अस अंडरस्टैंड. नंबर वन, व्हाट हैपेंस इन केस ऑफ अ सेलर्स मार्केट? यू डोंट फील द नीड टू इनोवेट. सो सेलर्स मार्केट में जो मैन्युफैक्चरर हैं, he does not feel the need to innovate. And why does he not feel the need to innovate? Because whatever he is producing, it is getting sold. So when it is getting sold, obviously he does not have to innovate. Number two, how is the customer treated in a seller's market? Customer is treated as कष्ट से मर, यानी कि customer. Now this is how a customer is treated in a seller's market. And what is the meaning of consumer? कौन जा मर, and that is the meaning of consumer in case of a seller's market. And that is how we started progressing post independence in our country. And finally, all this, remember friends, led to poor service and poor products, substandard products. Obviously, जो मैं बना रहा हूँ, अगर वो आसानी से बिक रहा है, और याद रखिए वो आसानी से नहीं बिक रहा है, वो बड़े प्रीमियम पर बिक रहा है. Even though the product was substandard quality, because the demand was phenomenal and supply was controlled, it was selling like a hot cake. So what happens? Let me give you a few examples of poor quality and poor products that we produced in this country. Please remember, it's not a matter of pride to discuss all that I am discussing with you. But it is said that if we do not repeat from the history, we are condemned to repeat it. I am discussing all these examples with you just to make you aware so that what happened doesn't happen. We become better and better and better. We become a world-class country in terms of products and also in terms of services. So let me give you an example. Firstly, scooter. I'm sure you would know this. Some of you would know this. There was a time in this country that there was only one scooter that was produced in this country. So एक समय था हिंदुस्तान में कि जब किसी माता पिता के घर में जैसे ही बच्चा पैदा होता था, तो माता पिता क्या करते थे? वो पिताजी सबसे पहले जाके जैसे ही बच्चा पैदा हुआ, the father would go to the market to a scooter shop and scooter showroom, and book a scooter. अब आप सोचेंगे, is it that when India got independence, the newly born were so advanced that they would start cycling, they would start riding scooter immediately? Of course not. Then why would he go and book the scooter as soon as the birth would take place? And that is because उसको मालूम था कि जब तक मेरा बच्चा 18 साल का होगा तब जाके मुझे स्कूटर की डिलीवरी मिलेगी. So in this country, for a simple scooter, a basic product, people had to wait for 18 years because of the policies that we followed in this country. And not only that, there used to be airline in this country called Indian Airlines. Now the flights were never on time, and the service was pathetic. Food was also equally pathetic. So it was so bad in during those days that they would say that when you board a flight of Indian Airlines, they would say Indian Airlines का जो IA है उसका meaning है inform Allah. उसका meaning है inform Allah because everything was so pathetic. And then there was another airline called Air India. And Air India का जो AI है उसका meaning था already informed. There was another airline in this country called Vayudut. People prefer to call it Yamdut. And why they would do so? Because sometimes the door was coming down and sometimes the tire was coming down when the flight was on its course. So, and then you had a telephone. And friends, let me tell you, this is something very interesting. Those students who would be having 2-3 mobile connections today would perhaps find it absolutely difficult to believe. एक समय था हिंदुस्तान में कि आज जो मोबाइल आप जेब में रख के कहीं भी लेके जा सकते हैं एक समय तक और आपको 2 मिनट में मोबाइल का कनेक्शन मिल जाता है. There was a time in this country that for getting a simple telephone, people had to wait for 8 to 10 years. And please remember, telephone in this country was a symbol of status. अगर आपके पास में टेलीफोन है तो आप बड़े आदमी, मेरे पास में टेलीफोन नहीं तो मैं छोटा आदमी. There was a time in this country कि जब कोई माँ बाप अपनी बेटी के लिए रिश्ता ढूंढने जाते थे और जब किसी लड़के के घर में जाते थे तो वो लड़के से बाद में बात करते थे. पहले देखते थे कि घर में फ़ोन है कि नहीं, कि कल को अगर बेटी से बात करनी पड़े तो बात तो कम से कम हो सके. टेलीफोन. And we had to wait for a period of 8 to 10 years post independence because of the policy that we followed, and that is how it happened. Indian Railways, trains were never running on time. Doordarshan, the quality of the channel that we had was so good that people would prefer to call it as Dur Se Darshan. Everything in this country was sold at a premium, whether it was cement or it was urea or it was education. Somebody wanted to set up a new school or new college. So many hurdles that person will have to go through. Remember, the gentleman is trying to bring education, improve the standards of education, trying to build infrastructure for promoting education in this country, but that we would need to go through so many hurdles, and that is what would happen. So many companies that we had in this country, Elvin, Calvinator, Western TV, HMT watches, all these companies were producing goods that were not satisfactory at all, but they were commanding premium. And why? Because we pursued controlled economy. And the policy of primacy of politics over economics was continued. As a result of that, friends, what happened? The year was 1991. Prime Minister was Chandrasekhar. Finance Minister was Yashwant Sinha. Month was May, year was 1991. And what were the headlines in the newspapers? The headlines in the newspaper were India at the threshold of international bankruptcy. So from independence in August 1947 to the month of May 1991, what did we earn in this country post independence? We earned in this country threshold of international bankruptcy. Meaning what? Meaning our forex reserves were just enough for 11 days of imports. हमारे पास में इतने फॉरेक्स रिजर्व्स बचे थे जो कि सिर्फ 11 दिन के लिए सफिशिएंट थे. That means what? That means we had no money left. As a country, we had no money left. We were to tell about the whole world, look, gentlemen, we are broke, we are bankrupt, we are insolvent, we cannot pay you, please excuse us. And that were the headlines. But remember, one thing about India, one thing about भारत, one thing about हिंदुस्तान, कि इसने कभी किसी के सामने घुटने नहीं टेके. आपको ये जान के बहुत प्राउड महसूस होगा कि पूरी दुनिया में भारत ही एक ऐसा देश है जिसने कभी किसी देश के ऊपर आक्रमण नहीं किया, और भारत ही एक ऐसा देश है जिसने कभी किसी के सामने घुटने भी नहीं टेके. So we said, all right, we are in trouble, we are in difficulty, but we will not give in, we will not surrender. Let us fight it out. So what we did, we went to IMF, और हमने IMF इंटरनेशनल मॉनेटरी फंड, हम उनको जाके मिले और हमने उनसे कहा कि देखिए हम प्रॉब्लम में हैं, हमें मदद करिए. IMF ने कहा कि हम आपकी मदद करेंगे, जरूर करेंगे, क्योंकि कंट्रीज की मदद करना हमारा काम है. बट IMF said, look gentlemen, we would help you, but what is the guarantee that the money that we would lend to you will come back to us, because you are in deep trouble financially. So how do we ensure that we would get our money back? So we told IMF, please tell us, what do you want? And friends, IMF told to us, and IMF said, the only thing that we can accept as a guarantee from you as a country is your gold. And my friends, 40 metric tons of gold was flown from India. Aircrafts full of gold flew from India carrying this 40 metric tons of gold. And against this pledge of 40 metric tons of gold, the Bank of Japan, the Bank of England, IMF agreed to help us. But they said, okay, wait a minute. Your gold is fine as a security, but there's a problem. So we said, all right, tell us what is the problem now. And IMF said, look, gentlemen, your gold is fine as a security, but please understand, if you keep on doing what you have been doing for all these years, you are going to be deeper in the ditch than what you are today. So we said, what do you want now? Please tell us. And IMF said, what we want is that you will have to reform. और अगर मैं हिंदी में कहूँ तो IMF ने हमसे कहा कि अगर आप चाहते हैं कि हम आपकी मदद करें तो आपको सुधरना होगा. And friends, that is how, under the mandate, under the diktat of IMF, in 1991, we started first round of reforms in this country. A lot of people talk about who should be given credit for the reforms of 1991 in this country. Should the credit go to Chandrasekhar or Yashwant Sinha or Narasimha Rao, who was the Prime Minister when the reforms were implemented, or the credit should go to Manmohan Singh, the then Finance Minister? Of course, some credit can definitely go to all of them. But let me tell you, friends, if you ask me, the credit for the reforms of 1991 should go to all the unscrupulous politicians, unscrupulous bureaucrats, unscrupulous professionals, unscrupulous businessmen, unscrupulous media people, because of the combined teamwork of all these unscrupulous people at that point in time, the situation of the country was made so worse that we had no choice but to go to IMF and but to implement the reforms of the 1991. अगर आप मुझसे पूछें तो मैं आपसे कहूँगा कि उस समय अगर कोई भी और प्रधानमंत्री होता या कोई भी और फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर होता तो उसको कोई दूसरी चॉइस नहीं थी. रिफॉर्म्स तो हमको इम्प्लीमेंट करने ही पड़ते थे क्योंकि हमारे देश की इकोनॉमिक हालत, कंडीशन उस समय इतनी खराब हो चुकी थी. सो इन 1991 we had the first set of reforms. And what was the impact of the first set of reforms? The impact of the first set of reforms was massive increase in consumerism with umpteen choice to the consumer. तो जो रिफॉर्म्स 1991 में आए उसका देश को फ़ायदा हुआ, डेफिनेटली फ़ायदा हुआ. और क्या फ़ायदा हुआ? फ़ायदा ये हुआ कि देश में कंज्यूमरिज्म को बढ़ावा मिला. और कितना बढ़ावा मिला कि पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस अगर आपको एक स्कूटर खरीदना हो तो आपको 18 साल वेट करना पड़ता था, लेकिन पोस्ट रिफॉर्म्स द सिचुएशन चेंज्ड कंसिडरेबली बिकॉज इंडिया बिकेम एन ओपन इकोनॉमी. India became an open economy for the whole world. So, whole world, the licenses were done away with, the controls were done away with, inspections also were done away with. So much of things having gone, India became an open economy, and consumerism improved, and situation changed dramatically. How the situation changed dramatically? Let me give you an example. तो पहले आपको अगर स्कूटर चाहिए 18 साल पहले आपको बुक करना पड़ता था, लेकिन पोस्ट 1991 रिफॉर्म्स थिंग्स इम्प्रूव्ड सो मच that in case if you wanted to purchase a new scooter or motorcycle, what you needed, you only needed to whisper it in the ears of a friend of yours कि यार मुझे मेरे बेटे के लिए या मेरी बेटी के लिए मोटरसाइकिल लेनी है या स्कूटर लेना है. And believe me, your whisper in the ears of a friend of yours will reach to all the motorcycle manufacturers of this country. How? I don't know, but this it would reach to all the motorcycle manufacturers, be it Bajaj, be it LML, be it TBS, be it Hero, be it Honda. All the motorcycle manufacturers and the scooter manufacturers would come to know that you want to buy a motorcycle or you want to buy a scooter. And the very next day morning, they will be at your doorsteps. And they would tell you, sir, प्लीज़ बाय मोटरसाइकिल फ्रॉम अस. हम आपको रजिस्ट्रेशन फ्री देंगे, इंश्योरेंस फ्री देंगे, आपकी गाड़ी में पेट्रोल पूरा टैंक मुफ्त में भर के देंगे, आपको एक सोने का सिक्का देंगे, हो सकता है आपको मलेशिया और सिंगापुर या हांगकांग जाने का मौका भी मिले. सो प्लीज़ बाय अ मोटरसाइकिल नॉट फ्रॉम अस. नॉट ओनली दैट, मे बी यू विल गेट अ चांस टू हैव अ डेट विद प्रियंका चोपड़ा और दीपिका पादुकोण और मे बी आलिया भट्ट ऑफ दैट टाइम. So this is how the things changed in this country post the reforms of 1991. As much as इतनी सिचुएशन बदल गई कि आपको मोटरसाइकिल खरीदने की जरूरत भी नहीं थी. आपको क्या करना था? You just needed to use Clinic All Clear shampoo and maybe you will get this motorcycle for free. Now this is the kind of transformation happened post the reforms of 1991 in the economy of this country. Let us quickly review how was the progress of post reforms of 1991 to the year 2014. So the transformation that happened in this country, demolition of license Raj and the inspector Raj was completely done away with. So more encouragement was given to the industry, more things were freed. Anybody and everybody could produce whatever they wanted to produce, and there was no restriction as to how much you wanted to produce. Privatization of private sector undertakings that were making losses, the government decided to privatize them. And why privatize them? Because they were making losses. By privatization, at least because of the efficiency management and the effectiveness and the productivity, the same PSUs would start making profit. Implementation of other reforms, integration with global economy. So India that earlier was a controlled economy, restricted economy, post reforms it became a open economy, getting integrated with the global economy. Increasingly tougher competition. So post independence, what was the situation? Demand was huge, supply was controlled, and therefore you could produce anything, you could produce and sell anything that you wanted. But post reforms of 1991, since it was an open economy, the competition was becoming very tough, and that was good for the end customer. Increase in the educational facilities. First time the government realized that something has to be done for improving the education standards and the infrastructure in this country. Focus on building of overall infrastructure, ever demanding vendor, never compromising customer, and this is how progressive conversion into a market driven economy started happening post 1991. That of course was a good sign. As a result of all this, what happened in this country? The positive impact of LPG liberalization, privatization, and the positive impact of the LPG was home loans started disbursed in 24 hours. So before the reforms of 1991, what would happen in this country? Before the reforms of 1991, what would happen in this country? In case if somebody wanted to take a home loan, remember he would go to a bank, and the bank would take 2 to 3 months, maybe 6 months. Going to a bank asking for a home loan, the manager would think as if he was doing a big favor to the borrower. But because of the reforms of 1991, the bankers started feeling the pinch of the competition, and the home loan disbursement started happening in 24 hours. Wider choice to the consumers, media knowledge explosion, increase in accountability at all levels. So earlier, the PSUs who were making losses and the top management would get away with, that was stopped. There was an accountability for everyone. Reduction in the rate tapism, good inflow of foreign capital. Since we opened India's economy for the whole world, FDI started happening, coming in this country. So foreign direct investment started coming in this country. So good inflow of foreign capital, as much as at one point in time, you would remember that our forex reserves were just enough for 11 days import, and the same level post reforms of 1991 increased to the size of $300 billion. Incidentally, today our forex reserves are to the tune of more than $600 billion, and that is how the progress has happened. India became a superpower in IT, and government started focusing on infrastructure development post 1991. तो हमने आज़ादी के बाद से लेके 1991 तक क्या हासिल किया? हमने हासिल किया इंटरनेशनल बैंकरप्सी, एंड उसके बाद में अंडर द मैंडेट ऑफ IMF वी स्टार्टेड रिफॉर्मिंग, एंड एज अ रिजल्ट ऑफ द रिफॉर्म्स things did change in this country. But unfortunately, the things changed, but not as much as was expected. So, what did not change? Even after the reforms of 1991, farmers continued to commit suicide. Progress in corruption continued. Now scam ran into crores from thousands. So even after the reforms of 1991, the level of corruption in this country was still of bigger in size. पहले हमारे यहाँ पे हजारों करोड़ों के हजारों के अमाउंट के लाखों के अमाउंट के करप्शन केसेस हुआ करते थे. Now the size ran into crores, not only in crores but lakh and crores. Few corrupt and unscrupulous politicians, bureaucrats, businessmen, professionals, bankers, and media people continued to prosper. So despite reforms of 1991, जो लोग बेईमानी जिनकी नीयत थी वो फिर भी इस देश में ग्रो करते रहे. 90% of country's wealth continued to be in the hands of 10% of people, and remaining 10% of the wealth was in the hands of 90% of the population of this country, and this gap continued to widening. 400 lakh crore black money was stashed outside India by these unscrupulous set of people, these politicians and bankers and bureaucrats and businessmen and media people. Law and order position continued to decline in the country every day, and legislature as fourth pillar continued to dominate the other three pillars of our constitution. So we have four pillars: we have legislature, we have judiciary, we have executive, and we have the media, which is supposed to be the fourth pillar. Now unfortunately, the structure of the constitution that we have, legislature has an upper hand, and that upper hand was continued even after the reforms of 1991. So what did not change? इकोनॉमी प्रोग्रेसिवली स्टार्टेड बिकमिंग अ बायर्स मार्केट. तो हम जो सेलर्स मार्केट थे उससे हम चेंज होकर बायर्स मार्केट बनना शुरू हुए. बट प्राइमेसी ऑफ पॉलिटिक्स ओवर इकोनॉमिक्स कंटिन्यूड. अनफॉर्चुनेटली दैट वाज द वर्स्ट that happened in this country even after the reforms of 1991. Though we started reforms in this country in 1991, but the mindset of the political people continued still to be the same. And please remember why the mindset continued of the people unscrupulous people is still to be the same, and that is because the reforms that came to this country in 1991, they did not come out of the choice or design or will of the people or the politicians of this country. It came out of the mandate from the IMF, and that is what did not change. Even the political mindset was still the same. Corruption continued to spread like a monstrous cancer. Emotional fooling through wrong narratives even continued. NPAs, non performing assets of the banks, kept on galloping at the speed of Sputnik. People thought that in this country, the size of the non performing assets was 36%, and that was completely wrong. The real size of the NPAs in this country since independence was 82%. That means what? That means please remember, हमारे देश में NPA का जो इंडिपेंडेंस से लेके आज तक का जो साइज है दैट इज 52 लाख करोड़। यानी कि बैंक ने जो पैसा इंडस्ट्री को दिया वो उसमें से जो एनपीए हो गया दैट इज 52 लाख करोड़। नाउ प्लीज रिमेंबर दिस 52 लाख करोड़ is not a number. If this 52 lakh crore of NPA, if this was used in building the infrastructure of this country, you can imagine that we are talking in terms of becoming a $5 trillion economy today, and by the year 25. If this 52 lakh crore of NPAs since independence, if these NPAs were plowed back into the development of the infrastructure of this country, India would have become $5 trillion economy much long ago, much before than Japan or China or America. And also please remember, and this is what you must understand, that it is said कि जो बैंकों ने इंडिपेंडेंस से लेके टिल द ईयर अबाउट 2016-17 जो पैसा बैंक ने इंडस्ट्री को उधार दिया उसमें से 100 रुपये अगर कुछ उधार दिए तो उसमें से खाली 18 रुपया वापस आया। ओनली 18 रुपीज वॉज रिकवर्ड, 82% was NPA, and that is, you can understand what kind of negative impact this kind of NPA would have had on the economic development of this country. So this did not change. We became big in terms of size of scams. The real visionary leadership was still missing, and that was unfortunately was the case. Reforms तो आए, रिफॉर्म्स इम्प्लीमेंट हुए, रिफॉर्म्स का फ़ायदा भी हुआ, लेकिन वो जो फ़ायदा होना चाहिए था, द बेनिफिट दैट शुड हैव रीच्ड टू एवरीवन, it did not reach to everyone. And so the real visionary leadership unfortunately was missing even after the reforms of 1991. As a result of that, friends, what happened? People started feeling frustration from corruption and policy paralysis, looking for a change at the helms of the nation. And all this, so from the independence to 1991, what did we earn? We earned international bankruptcy. And from 1991 to the year 2014, what did we earn? We earned frustration. We earned records of scams and corruption, and becoming one of the big country with a very negative and terrible record of corruption. So that is how the people started becoming uncomfortable, and they thought that this was the time when India needed a change in the leadership. And that is how we all know that in 2014 there was a change in the leadership in this country. And post May 2014, a new set of reforms started in this country. A new set of reforms started in this country. Now please understand, these reforms that came post 2014, May 2014, were not because of a mandate from IMF or World Bank. These reforms started taking place in this country as a choice, as a willing choice of leadership in this country. So today the world does not need socialism, capitalism, or communism alone. What it needs is omni-prosperitism. Dear students, future of this country is on your shoulders. And this is what we need to understand. There is nothing wrong with being socialist. There is nothing wrong with being capital, nothing wrong with capitalism. There is nothing wrong with communism either. But you must understand it very clearly. Socialism without accountability, socialism without accountability, capitalism without regulation, and communism without responsibility to contribute are equally dangerous. तो अगर एक कंट्री सोशलिस्ट है और वहाँ पर अकाउंटेबिलिटी नहीं है, दैट कंट्रीज इकोनॉमी इज बाउंड टू बी इन ट्रबल. एक कंट्री, एज हैपेंड इन आवर केस, एक कंट्री कैपिटलिस्ट है लेकिन वहाँ पर रेगुलेशन नहीं है, दैट कंट्रीज इकोनॉमी इज बाउंड टू बी इन ट्रबल. And that is what happened with America in 2008. I'm sure all of you would remember the global financial crisis that happened in 2008 because of lack of regulation in America, which is a capitalist country. And communism without the responsibility to make contribution is equally dangerous, and that is what happened in case of Russia. So we all know how Russia got disintegrated into 15 different countries as a result, because there was a communism but there was no responsibility on the part of the people to contribute. So अगर लोग ये सोचें कि मैं कम्युनिस्ट कंट्री हूँ और गवर्नमेंट मुझे घर पे लाके खाना देगी, अगर सब लोग ऐसा सोच के बैठ जाएंगे तो उस कंट्री की इकोनॉमी की तो 12 बजने वाले हैं. सो प्लीज रिमेंबर, देयर इज नथिंग रॉन्ग विद सोशलिज्म, देयर इज नथिंग रॉन्ग विद कैपिटलिज्म, देयर इज नथिंग रॉन्ग विद कम्युनिज्म. ऑल ऑफ देम आर इक्वली गुड provided there is a right leadership. And what we need, we do not need only capitalism or socialism or communism. As a country, what we need is omniprosperitism. Now, what is omniprosperitism? Omniprosperitism is growth of everyone. Not only growth of everyone, but also contribution by everyone. So everyone should contribute to the economy and everybody should grow from the economy. And that is what is omniprosperitism. And my dear students, this is what you must remember, because you as future leader, remember, will be discharging all these responsibilities. I am sure with God's grace, all of you will reach to very high positions in your life. And when you reach to the higher positions in your life, remember that you have got the opportunity to be at the helms, and that is because someone trusts you, that you would think for everyone and not only for yourself. So what is required, friends, is leadership. So what we need a leader with an attitude of omniprosperitism. So if an economy has a leader, if the economy has a leadership which is thinking in terms of omniprosperitism, economy of that country is bound to grow. Economy of that country is bound to grow. And that is how, friends, post May 2014, we have a very frequent introduction of so many reforms one after the other. As you know, someone who introduced me in the beginning, he was mentioning very rightly, and I'm glad that he did. So Make in India, Startup India, Stand Up India, Mudra Yojana, Ease of Doing Business, Amendment to the Companies Act, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, Jan Dhan Yojana, Planning Commission, Ujjwala Yojana, Demonetization, GST, Product Linked Incentive, Smart Cities, Amrut Mission, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, Agriculture Reforms, Atmanirbhar Bharat. So all these reforms that have been introduced post 2014 have really started making very positive impact on the economy of this country. And I'm sure all of you must be keeping a watch as to how India today is being perceived, how India's economy is being perceived today globally, and it is considered to be the ultimate destination for all by all the investors all over the globe. And that is what is happening, and that is how so much of FDI is flowing in. So many companies all over the world, they want to come and set up business in India, because they understand that future is where India's economy is. And please remember, and that is because of the attitude of omniprosperitism. So reforms of 2019 and 2014, how do we compare? And we must compare, and you all students must understand this very very clearly. And because why you need to understand this very clearly, because number one, for your your own understanding, and number two, so that be able to talk to others and let them know as to what is the difference between the reforms of two phases that we had in this country. So, number one, please remember, reforms of 1991 were a result of a diktat from IMF, International Monetary Fund. Reforms of 2014 are a result of mandate from the people of India. Reforms of 1991 were a result of mismanagement of economy. Reforms of 2014 are for good governance and omni-prosperitism. Reforms of 1991 were under compulsion. We had no choice, but we had to go for the reforms of 1991 under the mandate of the IMF. But reforms of 2014 are by choice and design under a visionary leadership. 1991 reforms implemented, but mindset at the top was still the same. And that is really something which was absolutely undesirable. With the reforms in 1991, the mindset at the top of the leadership should also have undergone a change, and they must have realized as to what all that we have done, which has put into this condition of international bankruptcy. Let us stop doing all that. But all that continued, and that is how the mindset at the top was still the same, even though the reforms of 1991 were implemented. Reforms of 2014, mindset at the top is positive, progressive, and proactive. So this is the difference between the reforms of 2009 of 1991 and 2014. Now, I'm sure, friends, you must be wondering and you must be wanting to know as to how is India's economy poised today with COVID around. Now, remember, so today we are in an exceptional position. So, not only we have to manage the economy, but we also have to handle the COVID. How do you see as to India's economy going to perform in the times to come? For that, we need to understand as to what are the prerequisites for an economy to do well. So किसी भी दुनिया की किसी भी इकोनॉमी को अगर परफॉर्म करना है, अच्छा परफॉर्म करना है, अच्छा डेवलपमेंट करना है, अच्छी तरह से ग्रो करना है, what are the prerequisites? So the prerequisites are: number one, abundance of natural resources; number two, adequacy of skilled and productive manpower; number three, technological advancement; number four, sound manufacturing sector; number five, sound service sector; number six, adequacy of agri produce, इवन एक्सेस ऑफ इट. सो एग्रीकल्चर जो प्रोड्यूस है देश का, वो कितना होना चाहिए, वो एडिक्वेट होना चाहिए. एडिक्वेट ही नहीं बल्कि एडिक्वेसी से भी ज़्यादा होना चाहिए. यानी कि हमारे देश की जो ज़रूरत है, उस देश की ज़रूरत से भी ज़्यादा हमारे देश का एग्रीकल्चर प्रोडक्शन होना चाहिए फॉर द इकोनॉमी टू डू वेल. लिबरल एंड एनकरेजिंग पॉलिसी फ्रेमवर्क, कॉम्पिटिटिव एनवायरनमेंट, accountable political system, good education facilities and infrastructure, overall good infrastructure, free flow of capital and technology. So we today have the advantage of not only FDI coming in, but we also have the advantage not only getting the technology from outside, but today there is so much of emphasis in this country on the research and development and on in development of indigenous technology, which of course is a fantastic sign for the growth of the economy of this country. We need tapping and optimization of natural resources, good governance and transparent administration, differentiate between profit and value addition, visionary leadership, constant removal of inefficiencies from the system, national culture of character and commitment towards the country and everyone. And please remember, that is very very important. The character, the culture of the country, the character of the country has to be nationalistic, and that is what is required. And finally, of course, strong conviction and belief, that is what is required for development of economy of any country. और अगर मैं आपसे पूछूं तो आपको क्या लगता है कि आज की तारीख में on these 19 parameters, how are we doing? I'm sure answer of every one of you is going to be that India stands very strongly on all these 19 parameters that I have mentioned. And if India is strong, stand very strongly on all these 19 parameters, it means what? It means India is poised to do extremely well as far as the economy is concerned going forward. Please remember, friends, every problem is an opportunity for growth. So where there is a problem, remember, it's not a problem, it's an opportunity. The only thing is we need to have that mindset of looking at that problem as an opportunity. So, what are the master mantra for growth of an economy and well-being of its people? Finally, friends, so the master mantra for growth of an economy and well-being of its people are, as I'm going to share with you. And remember, all of you, all my dear students, this is what you need to make a mental note of. Why? Because this is what is expected from every one of you. So number one, please remember the first mantra is value addition and value creation by one and all. So अगर किसी देश की इकोनॉमी को अच्छा करना है, if an economy of a country has to progress well, do well, perform well, that means every citizen of that country has to contribute. Every citizen of that country has to add value. You cannot have passengers. Everybody has to be a contributor. Number two, everyone has to contribute. Number three, no place for free lunches for anyone, no freebies. And if an economy has to do well, no free lunches, no freebies. Everyone must contribute, everyone must make a value addition. And finally, accountability for all. So if we all remember these four things, that is going to help us in ensuring that the economy does well. So my question, friends, to all of you before I close, are you ready to take your responsibility? And what is the responsibility? The responsibility is become an example. Become an example for others to follow. Thank you so much.